Welcome to the Divorce Survival Guide podcast, where we have open and honest conversations about co-parenting, separation, divorce, and the hardest question of all, should you stay or should you go? I'm Kate Anthony, your divorce survival guide, and I'm here to help you navigate some of the roughest waters you've ever swum in and answer some of your toughest questions. I've been to hell and back, and now it's my mission in life to help you get to the other side of this process with your sanity and your heart intact.
Hey everyone, welcome back. So today I have with me Vanessa Bennett. She's been on the show before. She's amazing. Vanessa is a highly regarded and licensed holistic psychotherapist. She's a clinical entrepreneur, mental health content creator, and the author of the best-selling relationship book, It's Not Me, It's You. She wrote that book with her partner, John. I think you might know him as the Angry Therapist. She brings an incredible wealth of information and expertise, and her unique perspective on fostering healthy relationships and navigating codependency provide valuable insight to you guys. She brings it here. I love talking to Vanessa. Every time we have a conversation, we feel like we could talk all day. So in this episode, we're talking about codependence, how it influences our behaviors and choices, why Vanessa and I both don't think this is a dirty word. This is an important word. It's important for us to understand our habits and behaviors, where they come from, because it's the only way we can actually heal them, right? So knowledge is power, my friends. I have so many other things to tell you, and I feel like I'm so wrapped up in book stuff. Just a reminder, my book is available for pre-order right now. It doesn't come out until December 26th. I know that sounds like a weird date, but there's a reason for it, I promise. But it comes out the day after Christmas. But pre-orders are really important. So if you like this podcast, if you like me, if you feel like you've gotten a lot out of listening to me over the last months or years or whatever, and you feel like you want to do something nice for me, please pre-order my book. It would be amazing. There are places to pre-order that are not Amazon. So if you are like, how can I pre-order this book when I can't order that and put that in my Amazon cart, there are other places to order it. So it is available on all other platforms where you can purchase books, many of which can be done anonymously, secretively. You could buy a Visa gift card and then go and buy it on another one of those platforms, so it doesn't show up on your credit card statement. Anyway, I know that's a lot to ask, but I'm asking it because it matters. So anyway, so back to Vanessa, my dear friend and colleague, and someone I literally she inspires me. I learn from her. She's a smart, badass woman, and I adore her. So without further ado, here's my conversation with Vanessa Bennett. Vanessa, thank you so much for coming back on to my show.
So glad to be here, Kate.
I want to start off with something that you and I hear all the time, which is people that are like, I don't like using the word codependency. It's so shameful. It's so stigmatizing. Let's not use that word, that it's like demoralizing to a woman or a victim or whatever. What are your thoughts on that?
I call bullshit. There's my thoughts.
This is why I love you. Okay.
Brought to you by. Here's what. I don't think anybody says the same thing when we talk about somebody getting diagnoses of ADHD or of autism spectrum disorder or of bipolar, right? All these different things. Having a word, having language having a quote unquote diagnoses, even though I know that codependency is not in the DSM. I get that.
Right? Sure.
But having this language is very helpful, right? Because it really does help us understand that it's not just us. Like, we're not crazy, right?
I'm not
doing
crazy. Yes.
People who are listening. I don't know. Maybe you are a little crazy. We're all a little crazy, right?
Right. I'm totally crazy.
Yeah. I mean, same. So I call bullshit on that. I also feel like the same people, and this is kind of a generalization, I'll own that, but I do feel like the same people that are saying that are also the same people who, in other breaths, are saying things like, it's not all about the patriarchy. We don't always have to say patriarchy. It's not, we're not a white supremacist culture. We don't always have to talk about that. Every problem we have is not because of capitalism. We don't have to talk about that. It tends to be, in my opinion, the same people who don't want to just call a fucking spade, right? So, like, let's just say,
I love you so much. I just need to interject. I love you so much.
We live in a patriarchal, capitalistic, white supremacist world, right?
Yes,
and I would add in there, wildly codependent. You cannot take any of those out of the sentence when you're talking about the society we live in. They all live in the same space. They're all interwoven. Without one, the others would crumble, right? And so I think that even though codependency is something that we've always talked about more in like the mental health addiction realm, I think that's similar to things like white supremacy, patriarchy, and capitalism, which also should be talked about within the realm of mental health. Right? They all have to be talked about. Like, it's not about, oh, this is social and cultural, this is mental health. Like, we know better now. It's all connected. You can't talk about the individual and not talk about the collective and the collective experience that we're having. Right.
That's right. That's right. This is why I always say, like, you know, people are like, you shouldn't talk about politics on your, you know, I'm like, first of all, A, I can talk about whatever the fuck I want.
Right.
And B, if I'm not talking about politics, I am not talking about the systemic, like the things that we can do, the votes that we can cast to shift the very structures that are keeping us, you know, captive.
Sick.
Yeah. That's right.
You're right. I mean, I actually think that we do a disservice within the mental health community. We do a disservice to people by not understanding that it's all connected, right? Now, listen, I'm more of the camp of like, we need to burn the whole thing to the ground. I don't think a couple votes are going to save it. I think it all needs to go.
Yeah.
Like, throw the baby out with the bathwater, please, God. Start from scratch, right? But but you're right. Like, we can't not.
I just don't want to have to. I just don't want to live through that. Like, I get it. I mean, we are living through it.
We're in the midst,
and we won't. Right? Exactly. I mean, I'm 100% with you on that, and then I get terrified. So yes, if we don't name codependency, we're not actually naming the air that we're breathing, the elephant in every room. And I love that you said it's wildly codependent, because I was just writing a chapter in my book about this, and I was saying, like, I don't know anybody who doesn't suffer from this, because it has its roots in childhood trauma, and I don't know anybody, certainly not in my generation, right, who doesn't have some form of childhood trauma that would lend itself to this.
It's rooted in childhood trauma. But again, I think you can't talk about childhood trauma without looking at the society we live in, right? So it's societal, right? And so everybody who lives in this society is going to experience the same thing. Again, it's like saying that nobody experiences the fallout from white supremacy. Yes, we do. All of us do. It's just like saying that men suffer just as much under patriarchy as women do. They do, right? Of course they do. It is the air we breathe, to your point. So it's rooted in childhood trauma, but we're all traumatized by nature of living in the kind of society we live in. Right. And so you can't separate them, right? I mean, my mother lived in the same society as her mother, right? And so all of these ways of parenting, at least for the last 4,000 years, right, under kind of this more patriarchal structure, all of the ways of parenting that were passed down came from somewhere. Right?
And they're all traumatizing.
Exactly.
For the most part. Yeah.
100%. Yeah.
Yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. The basics of codependency are, if you're okay, I'm okay. And I think we've had this conversation before, but how do you see the roots of it? Yes, childhood trauma. Yes, right. How does all of that become codependent? Like, what do we mean when we say that?
Yeah. I mean, that little pithy statement I always have, which is this, like you said, if you're good, I'm good. If you're not good, I'm not good. Right. I mean, what ends up happening is we walk around relationally living external lives, right? So seeking external validation. We grow up in a society that teaches us that we should not and cannot listen to our internal voice, our internal self, right? So we learn very young to turn it down, turn it off, cut it off. And so instead we become very externalized, right? So we look to other people to tell us, are we good? Are we lovable? To regulate us, right? And whether that's people, which is the more codependent way of doing things, or whether that's booze, or whether that's drugs, or whether that's porn, or whether that's just sex and love, right? They all serve the same purpose. And really that is to self-regulate. That's to self-soothe in a world that we are not taught to do so. And we're taught very young to cut our relationship off from the self, right? Yes. And so what does that look like relationally? Well, it looks like, again, I have a really hard time self-soothing. I have a really hard time sitting with very normal, big emotions, right? And so I look to other things to make it better, make me feel better. I only view myself through the eyes of other people. So I have a really hard time like being with myself and knowing that I'm okay, I'm good, I've got me, right? For women, a lot of times, especially not just women, but more so women, we are less than if we're not partnered.
Yep.
Right.
Yep.
I'm not good unless I'm with somebody, unless I've been chosen. Right. It's this seeking to be chosen. I mean, it manifests in so many ways.
So many ways. The question that I get, in my work being the, helping women decide whether to stay or go. One of the biggest questions people ask me is like, but what if I'm alone forever?
And is that the worst thing?
Right. That's what I say.
I love my partner, but that sounds like a vacation. I mean, I know I'm being kind of pithy. I'm being a little offhanded with it, but I really do want to start challenging this narrative. Is that the worst thing?
That's what I say. I'm like, and so what? And so what if you are? At the end of the day, you may, if you really want to be partnered and you make that choice from a healthy, healed place, that's great. If you find someone who is now a benefit to your life.
Yes.
But if you come to that place and you do that healing work and you don't find someone, you're gonna be okay. Right? Because you've done that work.
Better than okay.
Better than okay. And that's what I say about, myself. Like I'm not partnered. And it's not because I can't find anybody. I mean, yeah, it is. It's because I can't find it. I have not met anyone yet who is a benefit to my life at this stage of it.
Mm-hmm. It's like, I want the partnership to be justified.
Mm-hmm.
I don't want it to be a necessity. Right. And so the work becomes, how do I love myself well enough and know, I always talk about like the sundae, right? Like I'm the sundae. And sundaes are delicious, whether they have a cherry on top or not. That person I'm looking for could potentially be the cherry on top of the sundae. But I've eaten plenty of delicious sundaes that have no cherry, right? Like I'm the sundae. You're the cherry. I could take it or leave it, right?
That's right.
You might make it better, but you don't make it amazing. You don't make it what it is. That sundae is already the sundae, right? And so that partnership that you're seeking should make it better and only better. That's it. Now, I'm not saying Pollyanna, it's going to be amazing and beautiful and happy and rainbows and butterflies all the time, but that shit better make my sundae better or I don't want it.
That's right. And that's exactly why I'm still single. Because, even the process of dating in Los Angeles, which, where we both live, is like a whole thing that really sours my sundae.
Yeah.
Right. So it's like, even that process, I'm like, ugh, I can't, this is not helping my life. This is not a cherry. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I hear that a lot too. Like a lot of my friends who are, in their 40s, late, early 50s, who are on the other side of divorce or separation, and they are curious and they start dating, and they say exactly what you're saying. I mean, it's funny too, because I guess one of my best friends who's like wildly introverted. And we always laugh about this because I'm like, well, if you want a partner, he's not just going to show up at your front door and knock. You know what I mean? Like, you got to
listen. That's me. That's me. I'm like, are you? No. All right. I'm not.
She's like, she would be happy never leaving her house again, you know? And I'm an extrovert. So we've laughed about the fact that like, I could be single right now, walk into a coffee shop and leave with a boyfriend in 5 minutes. Like, that's just my personality because I'm like always open to like, oh, hey, nice to meet you. What's your life story? Like, I'm out there, you know?
Right.
And it's not work for me. It's easy for me. And so I also do have to acknowledge that there are just different personality types. It's harder for some people than it is for others. And that's a thing, you know?
I mean, 100%. The idea of walking into a coffee shop and like I walk into a coffee shop and I may look around and be like, okay, I gotta go.
That's right? her. Like, that is her. Yeah. Oh my, it makes me crazy. We'll be out together and I'm like looking for her and she's facing her phone. And I'm like, look up. Like there was like 6 hot guys just walk by and you are buried in your phone. You're missing it. She makes me crazy. I'm like, I can't do all the work for you.
I'm going to go out. I'm going to go when we meet for coffee.
I'll be your wingman.
I will not put my face in my phone. I promise. Oh my God. Awesome. So yeah. So this idea that like being alone is it's not the worst thing in the world, right? Mm-hmm. Okay. Like we talk about that. And I think that for women who are in this space of like, but I feel that, right? I feel that.
Sure.
What is the work to get to that place? What do we do to get to the point where we have that sense of self, that self-identity that you're talking about?
You know, I think it's twofold, maybe threefold, like work that goes on in parallel. And so number one, I would say it's sitting with ourselves.
Ew.
I mean, that's why most people don't do it, right?
Yeah,
it's sitting with ourselves. It's feeling things like loneliness and longing and regret and grief and sadness and all of these feelings that we don't want to feel. Thus, the list of things external that I listed earlier, right? That we reach for to not have to feel them, which includes people. We sit with those feelings and we feel them to the depths of our core. And then we make it out the other side and we realize that feeling lonely doesn't kill us. Now, listen, that is an aside from loneliness as a thing right now that we've realized through research post-pandemic is actually killing people. And that's what I want to speak to as far as like my second thing.
Okay.
But I do think step one is feeling the damn feelings and recognizing your own personal patterns in what do you reach for when you don't want to feel the feelings. Starting to get very intimately familiar with your internal landscape, your internal world, the way that you process things, and starting to notice what happens for you when you start to feel icky feelings. What do you go for? What do you reach for? Do you reach for your phone? Do you reach for Netflix? Do you reach for another person, sex, like whatever it is, right? Drinks, whatever.
Dateline.
Yeah. Murder mysteries, right?
Murder. What does that say
That's
about me?
One. I know. Well, I mean, you and most women, actually, that's like a thing.
I know. Exactly.
So that's number one. Now, again, like I said, twofold. The second thing I want to say is I don't want to minimize the kind of catastrophic effects that loneliness has on us as people, right? And is continuing to have, and it's growing. Right. And that's a very real thing. But that loneliness, the solution, air quotes, because it's a big solution, but the solution is not just I need to be in an intimate romantic relationship. It's I need to have more close, intimate relationships, plural. We live in this hyper individualistic, this rugged individualism type, Marlboro man archetype culture. We are feeling the fallouts of that, right? Yeah. Of that bullshit that we were kind of served up. We're not meant to live that way. We are collectivistic people.
Right. And then we add the pandemic that just sort of
and that was kind of like the pressure
isolated.
Cooker,
right.
So it's not that people weren't feeling lonely, but that was the pressure cooker. That was the thing that really like the top blew off. Right. But I don't think the solution to that kind of loneliness is just, I have to date somebody. It's like, no. You got to look at how do we live our lives? I mean, this is a societal thing, right? Like we are very cut off. Even like the suburb move in the 50s to the nuclear family. I mean, that is part of the problem, right? We're not meant to.
Right.
We're village creatures, right?
That's right. Yeah. I actually the white picket fences, jail bars, right?
Exactly.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like, who's your village? Where's your village? You got to build your village, right? And if you realize you don't have a village, like that is part of that work. So I think that's kind of like when I say the two prong, it's like sitting with the loneliness, but also how do I get in there and change the fact that I'm lonely without thinking that the only solution is like to find a man, right?
Right. And that's really difficult, I will say, in particular for single women.
And for introverts.
And for introverts, right?
Yep.
Exactly, right. And because I know as an introvert, I have the need and the desire, right? That like the primal need for community and all of that. Then I really need to go home, and I also like don't want to be the one to have to organize it and do all the inviting, right? And so this is something that I find as a single person is that I don't get invited to all the barbecues. I don't like. There's a whole family and couples community thing that happens that when you're single, you don't get invited to. I think single men get invited far more because everyone's like, oh no, he's so lonely and we have to take care of him. Right. Collectively. Right. Yeah. Right. For women, divorced women in particular, I think there is like it's not a shunning, right? But it can feel like it.
It can feel like it. Yeah. I mean, I think I've heard my friends speak about this too, who are single. It's like this, oh my God, I'm just laughing because the image that just came into my mind is there's a Sex and the City episode where they talk about this, like the single women are like the pariahs, right? Like they don't want 100%. Them around their married friends. And she's like, what do you think I'm going to do? Right. Like you think I want to have sex with your husband? Like that's right. So I'm just thinking about that episode.
Literally no.
I know, like that just popped up. But yeah, I think that it's unfortunate. I think you do have to be very particular about the people that you do call your friends. I mean, I know that I have lots of single female friends and they come, I invite them to all the things, whether it's couples, families, them. I don't care. I don't see it that way. So I think maybe number one, it's like, who am I actually considering as part of my inner circle? And if I realize that they're never inviting me out and I'm the one that's got to do all the work, well, then maybe it's time to rethink the friendship, right? Like all of our relationships should have kind of yearly improvement meetings, right? Like PIPs, if anybody's in corporate out there, a little, performance improvement plan.
Right.
You have evals. And I think sometimes these friendships, as we grow, it's like, it's not meeting the standard. Okay, well, what am I holding on to then?
Right. Yes. Yeah.
Also find an extrovert and let us adopt you. We are the planners. And that's a thing, right? They say that with introverts, like just an extrovert found me and adopted me as their friend.
I love that. And make sure it's somebody who's healthy, right? I think that I'm just thinking of like a friendship that I had for a long time with an extrovert who did all the planning and it was great. Like I was like, I'll get, I'll go along with everything you do, until I realized that there was also a control element. There was a toxicity element. There was it was not actually healthy for me.
Well, that's the evaluation, right? Like I think we need to get better at evaluating all relationships, whether it's romantic, friend, familial, I don't care what it is. Right. I think every relationship needs to be continually evaluated because we all grow, we all evolve, we all change. It can be a no fault zone. If a relationship is just no longer in alignment with you, then that's okay. It doesn't have to be some big breakup, right? Even romantically, it doesn't have to be some big thing. Like, can we just get better at saying, it's nobody's fault. We've just grown out of each other. I love you. I want the best for you. And then send each other on our way.
Wouldn't that be amazing? Wouldn't that be amazing if and then, the response is ego, right? It's also, shock, whatever, all of the things, right? We have feelings. You can have feelings about it.
Totally.
While also saying, shit, okay. If this isn't working for you, then it isn't working for me.
Exactly. Right.
Right.
Yeah. That's it.
Oh God. So, yeah. So, all right. So this two-pronged approach of like sitting with your feelings, and then looking, and then also finding community, right? And this is sort of how we, I guess the original question was, how do we work with this codependency? How do we start to heal this? How do we now, I mean, do you think that we ever become not codependent? Like, is that something that we get to erase from ourselves? Is that something that what do you think?
I don't think we erase anything, to be honest. I think that it's more about like integration. It's more about having a different relationship with parts of ourselves, right? I I mean, again, it's kind of like saying, do we think, at least in this lifetime, that we're going to see the end of white supremacy? Like, of course not. It's probably never going to happen. And not in my life anyway, unfortunately. But I think we can learn to have a different relationship with it. I mean, shit, I've been doing codependency recovery work for close to 15 years personally. And I still struggle.
Yeah.
But the struggling has gotten less intense, right?
Yeah.
It has gotten more manageable.
Mm-hmm.
I'm way quicker to call myself out on my bullshit. I'm way quicker to see the patterns, maybe sometimes even before I slip into them, right? But do the feelings, does the discomfort, does the like that discomfort in my skin, does that not happen? No, it still happens. But whereas it used to be very unconscious, right? The icky feeling happens. I do the codependent thing to try to soothe that icky feeling. They were coupled. I mean, there was no beat in between them at all.
Right.
Now the icky feeling still happens, but I've done enough work where I have a pause where I can really sit in it and go, do I need to act on this? If I do, what does that action look like? What would be in service of myself and my kind of greater health versus going down a path I know too much about and I don't want to keep going down. So I think that's what happens, right? Is like we just get more familiar. We also beat ourselves up less for it.
Yes.
Like I take it a lot less seriously now. I laugh at myself more now. Like, oh, what I want to do right now is have sex with you in this moment, partner, because I think it'll make the relationship more copacetic. You'll be in a better mood. It'll take the pressure off because it's what I should do. By the way, for all you women listening out there who are partnered or who want to be partnered, having sex in a relationship when you don't really feel like it, but you do it because you think you have to keep the relationship is codependent. Okay.
Yes.
That's something I've struggled with, right? That's what, even still, one of my big ones that comes up. Do I want to do this or am I doing this because it's what he wants and I think it'll make it better right now, right? Pause, question, sit with it, and then potentially, not always, but potentially do the hard thing.
And the response from your partner should be, oh my God, okay, right? Bummer, bummer. But I don't want you having sex you don't want to have.
Sure. Consciously. I mean, we've had those conversations. He will actually verbatim say those things. But unconsciously, does he want me to make him feel better? Of course he does.
Right.
Because he's just as codependent on me as I am on him.
Yeah.
It's not a one-way street.
Right.
We're all codependent, right? It takes two to tango.
That's right.
So he's also using me to suit himself.
Right.
So when I say no, I don't want you. I know what's happening. I'm not interested in this right now. And I know you're trying to use my body to make yourself feel better. I don't want to do that. Right. And however way I communicate that, hopefully a lot softer than that. He has to then sit with his own icky feelings.
Right.
Right. And say, I feel some sort of way and she's not making it better. So how do I make it better for myself?
Yes.
So I'm kind of forcing him also in that way to look at his own bullshit.
Right. And the way that looks in more toxic relationships is it's your fault. It's, you should
be doing this.
Yeah. Right. It's outward. It's the outward manifestation of whatever that feeling is. Right. Yeah. Then it's your fault and it's blame and shame.
If you loved me, you would do X, Y, Z. Right.
You're my wife. It's your duty. Hello, patriarchy.
Twitch. I twitch on that one. Yeah. It's not my duty actually to do anything because I'm your wife other than love myself and be as authentic as I can be, which is actually in service of you and of us. Right. Because if I'm doing something for you at the expense of myself, what I'm actually giving you is a lot of resentment and potentially hatred. That's not very loving.
Right.
So I'd really call out my act of loving because it's not loving at all.
No, it's not. It's not.
And now a quick word from our sponsor. Wait, that's me. I know I have a lot of podcast episodes for you to get through, and it can be really, really overwhelming to try and figure out where to start or to comb through which ones might be appropriate for you, whether you're trying to decide whether to stay or go, or you're already on the other side of the divorce process. Like, how do you know what to listen to? I have solved the problem for you. All you have to do is go to kateanthony.com/playlist. Answer a few short questions, and I will send you a curated list of podcast episodes to best support you as you navigate these tricky waters. I'll also help you identify where you currently stand on this journey and what's ahead, with resources to help you move through this process with knowledge and grace. So all you need to do is go to kateanthony.com/playlist, answer a few short questions, and you will have your curated list of podcast episodes that will support you wherever you are in your journey. And now back to our show.
And I know that a lot of my listeners are in very toxic, abusive relationships where I think the level of communication, authenticity, self-reflection, lack of ego that you're talking about is like completely like a foreign concept, nowhere near what's present in their marriages and in themselves. Right.
This is why I say partnering when justified. I mean, listen, it's not a popular opinion. I get a lot of shit when I talk about this stuff. Oh, it's not that easy. We have kids. I can't just leave. Barring the very extreme versions and examples of relationships where that's actually the case, right? So we're talking about abusive situations, financial abuse, threat of physical abuse, emotional abuse, right? Barring those, which are real. My question is always, why?
Right.
Why not? Tell me why not. I just like to know. I don't know. I think it's pretty simple. I think that's something Al-Anon really taught me, right? It's not easy, but it is simple.
I tell a story in my book actually about like in my first year of Al-Anon, and this is going back 25 years, my very first year. And I was pretty sure that my boyfriend at the time, who is now my ex-husband, was cheating on me. Now I know he probably was, by the way, but that's a whole other story. But I was not okay. I mean, like so far beyond okay. It was panic. It was like I was going to die.
Yes.
I shared about it in a meeting, and this guy came up to me afterwards and he was like, so what if he does, like, what if he is cheating? He was a little like abrasive and not very communicative and all of those things. Right. But he was like, so what if he is? And I was like, excuse me, if he is, like, what are you talking about? And he's like, really? What if he is?
Play the tape out. So what if he is?
I could not play the tape beyond
a lot of us can't.
I will die. And I hated that man. I was so angry at him for a few years until I finally, as we do the work, and I will say that I think Al-Anon is one of the best places to do this work. As the work sort of washed over me, and as I grew in this way, it was like, oh, right, I am totally okay. If that's doesn't mean I'm not going to have feelings about it.
Of course, we can separate the two. The feelings are going to be there, but it doesn't mean you're going to die.
I'm not going to die.
And that's the thing. I mean, listen, I don't want to minimize the very real wiring that goes on too. Like, if this isn't just societal, there is a wiring, there's an attachment wiring component to this, right? Which is when we are babies, if our primary attachment figure goes away, we die. And we know that. Right? From birth, we know that. Right. It is the biggest existential threat to our existence, right? It's our biggest anxiety as human beings. And so what happens is we grow up, we become primarily attached to somebody else, and many times that's in our romantic relationships. And those same existential attachment wounds get activated now by another person. And so it very much does feel like I will die if this partner and I are no longer together, if this person leaves, if I leave, whatever the thing, right? And that feels very real, but it's not, because now we are grown-ups and we've got us. And so then that's where that two-prong approach to, I have to learn to sit with myself and soothe and come back to myself and know that I've got me, and practice working through all of these codependent behaviors I've got going on. Because what happens is every time, like, let's just say boundaries. It's like, I'm the kind of person who comes in, I'm horrible with boundaries. I always say yes when I want to say no, right? Okay, great. Something to work with. I'm sure it's not the only codependent behavior you've got, but let's
we'll start that. Right. Start
with that one. Every time you do the hard thing, every time you say no when you want to say it, or say no when you want to say yes, Right?
Or say yes when you want to say no.
Yeah. Either way, when you do the thing you want to do, not the thing you think you got to do. There you go.
Right. Okay. Yeah.
You are laying a brick on the foundation of that sense of self.
That's right.
You're teaching the self that I can listen to you. I can trust you. I respect you. I revere you. I've got you.
Mm-hmm. To the self, not to the other,
self,
not to the other, to the self, capital S, right?
Self, yes. Right. And so it seems like a quote unquote micro moment. I call them micro moments because in passing, it might not feel like a big deal. I'm on the phone with my friend or my mom and they say, I need you to do X, Y, and Z. And it feels overwhelming for me. And I want to say no. And I say no.
Right.
It's not actually, even though it feels like a micro moment, it's a big deal. It is a foundational brick on this sense of self. And that sense of self is what's going to get you through on the other side of a relationship that has expired, of I choose me instead of choosing this toxicity, right? So all of this work kind of goes hand in hand, right?
Absolutely. Yes, yes, yes. I love that you said that about I like the idea of like a foundational brick. I always, I always talk about neural pathways and how it's like, it's like ultimately it's a rope, but like we're laying it like one fiber at a time. And each time we lay a new fiber in the same direction, right? From A to B, it's weak, right? The more fibers, the more times we do that,
the stronger that rope.
The stronger the rope. And the bricks in the foundation, same concept, right? This is how we strengthen that. And the reward of, oh my God, I feel so much better about myself, or I'm not exhausted, right? And at first the response is like, oh God, like I pissed them off. Did I da 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 da? But knowing that you're not betraying yourself.
Yeah, it's self-abandonment, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. And by the way, when that feeling comes up, because it will, of guilt and oh no, and I made them mad at me and what's going to happen, that is when the process of sitting with yourself, the practice of sitting with yourself comes into play.
Yeah.
What do I want to do right now? I want to call them and fix it and apologize and make it better. Okay, well, I'm not going to do that. So instead, I'm going to sit here and I'm going to feel waves of discomfort, waves of abandonment, fear come up, because that's all it is.
Right.
That's all it is, not to minimize it, but that's all it is, as in that's what it is. That's the crux of it. It's my fear of abandonment being activated.
Right.
And I'm going to feel it. The stomach knots, the butterflies, the tension, the jaws clenched, the shoulders are literally feel all the feelings.
Right. You work a lot with, Buddhist principles and yoga and mindfulness, meditation, right? And that is the access, right, to those feelings. Can you talk a little bit about those and how that informs this, right? Because I think so many of us, it's like, well, I don't know how to sit in those feelings. Like I turn on Dateline, or I drink, or I shop, I have sex, right? And then you take away those things and we're asking people to just be. I think that, I know for me in the beginning of this, this journey, I was so squirrely. I didn't know what to do. Right. And I wasn't taught, like we weren't talking about mindfulness, as broadly 25 years ago when I, first started my codependency recovery journey. So can you talk about those principles and how they play into your work?
Yeah. I think that mindfulness as a muscle, as a practice, is kind of the crux for any self-development, any, work on this kind of path of individuation, because it's a component to self-awareness, right? So it's foundational. I hear a lot of people will say to me, oh, but it's exhausting. Like mindfulness is exhausting. It's like, well, no, it's not. What's exhausting is your mind. What's exhausting is the thoughts that don't ever stop, right? Until you become mindfully aware of them and can start to actually get in there and change some of that. I think sometimes we're scared of it because I think we're scared of what it's going to teach us about ourselves. But yeah, it's a muscle. I will say it's something that needs to be continually worked on. You would never go to the gym one time and expect to leave with rock hard abs. That would be nice, but that's not true.
Wouldn't that be
that's
great?
The reality. Right?
That'd be great.
So mindfulness is the same way. This is why this practice of every day being mindful, checking in, what's going on in my body. It's imperative to continuing to do this work. So meditation, people think, oh, it's like being a monk and sitting in lotus position on a cushion for, an hour a day. And it doesn't have to be like that. A lot of times when I specifically teach mindfulness techniques and kind of, healing modality as a healing modality, I always say, find one thing that you do every day, one mundane thing that you do every day, doing the dishes, brushing your teeth, taking a shower, driving to work, right? Whatever the thing is that you do every day, pick one. Every day for this entire week, I want that to be your meditation. So what do I mean by that? Let's say brushing my teeth, right? Okay. For the 3 minutes that I'm brushing my teeth, I'm going to pay attention when I open the cap of the toothpaste to the smell of the peppermint. I'm going to notice the color of it as I put it onto the toothbrush. I'm going to notice the sensation of the feeling of water and foam as I start to brush it on my teeth. I'm going to feel the cold, tingly sensation that the peppermint kind of creates in my mouth. I'm going to notice, well, now my mind is thinking about that meeting I've got at 9:00. Noted, thinking, come back to the sensation of the peppermint. Now I'm going to pay attention to the foam in my mouth and how I have to spit and the saliva. Okay, notice that, right? And you just keep coming back to it. And there's no shame in your mind wandering. Our minds think it's what they do, right?
Right.
It's just about noticing it wherever you notice it. Shit, you might be thinking for a solid minute about that meeting before you notice that you're thinking. Okay, thinking, got it. Come back to the feeling of the toothbrush, right?
Right.
And that's it. You've done that for 3 minutes. That's your meditation. That's you strengthening your mindful muscle for the day, right? So do teeth brushing every single day that week. Okay, next week, pick something else, making your bed, or, doing the dishes, whatever. But know that just like the gym, you've got to work it out. The stronger that muscle gets, the quicker and the easier it's going to be for you to be like, oh, like I'm in conflict with somebody right now and I feel hot. And I feel uncomfortable and my stomach is knotted and I can feel myself shutting down. I can feel myself dissociating. I'm leaving my body. My eyes are diverted. I'm like crossing my arms. I'm going in on myself. I'm noticing my racing thoughts. That stuff that then shows up relationally is super helpful, but you got to have a foundation. And that's where that muscle comes into play, right? Like working out that muscle.
That's so great. That's so helpful, I think, right? And I love the idea that we don't have to sit in meditation in lotus position for an hour every single day or even 5 minutes, right? It is actually weaving it into the process of something that we're already doing. And again, like you said, it's building that foundational structure, so that when we're in these bigger, more heightened moments, we have the access to, oh, how do I actually feel in this moment?
Yes.
Right. Because we do. And I think those of my, listeners who are in abusive relationships, and there are a lot of them, part of what happens is that we dissociate. That's, we have to, right? We have to, that's the self-preservation. But the more that we're actually becoming present to how this actually makes us feel, the more we recognize that, maybe there might be avenues out, right? And again, do those safely, have a safety plan, work with me, we'll figure it out. Make sure you, work on this with somebody who is trained as a domestic violence victims advocate. But coming back to that sense of self is the most important work you can do.
I mean, I would say we learn to dissociate. When you say we have to, we had to. I would say past tense.
Yes. Okay.
Right?
Yes. Right.
We had to for survival at some point in our life. It's where we learned the skill of dissociating. Like, thank God our psyche has this innate capability, right, to protect us. But what happens is that skill that we learned most likely in childhood continues to be a very strengthened muscle that we then rely on over and over again in our adult relationships. And once we start to do some of this work and we start to say, I'm not going to pull that tool out of the toolbox anymore. Instead, I'm going to be with it. I'm going to sit with it. I'm going to notice what's going on. I'm going to track it. I'm going to journal. I'm going to whatever the thing is, right? And I start to not be able to not pay attention to what's going on.
Yeah.
It becomes harder and harder to convince myself to rationalize the self-abandoning behavior. Because it's like, once you see, you can't unsee. Once you know, you can't unknow. Right. And so, And you know, that's a process. And for some people, it takes a really long time. Some of us have way more layers of that to unpack. And I totally get that. It is one of those, I'm trying to think of the exact quote. I always butcher it, but it's this quote where it's like, once the pain of, God, I'm so bad with quotes. Once the pain or the discomfort of like staying where you are is like, it's basically more painful.
Yes.
Than like the idea of leaving, right?
Right.
Or the idea of changing it. Like that, it's that crux, it's that crossroads where things start to change.
That's right. That's right. And I talk about that with addiction, right? Like once the shame or the pain or the impact of the addiction becomes greater than the, like what's on the other side, right? Like the pain of whatever it is that you're covering up.
Yes. That's the discomfort that I'm soothing, right? Through the booze. Or whatever the addiction is.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Oh my gosh. I love talking about this stuff with you, Vanessa. You're so, I just love your take on it. And I think it's really helpful and important to, you know, sort of unpack like, what is codependence? Like, and like, because we talk about all these things, but like, what does it really mean? Right. Yeah. And so you have such a great take on it. And I really appreciate you sharing your wisdom with us.
Thank you. Yeah. I appreciate you having me back on. This is always fun. Yeah. And listen, I'm not for everyone, just like none of us are for everyone. Yeah. I can be a little cut and dry with this stuff, I've been told. I mean, partly I'm a New Yorker.
Right. That's right. That's why we get along. I don't know.
And I get
Works
that.
For me.
And there are softer people out there, and it's not for lack of empathy. It's just the way that I deliver things. And I think that sometimes though, we need a little bit of like as I've been called, the cold water in the face therapist.
Yeah.
Sometimes we need a little bit of that.
Though. No, I love that. I love that. It's like, here's the mirror. Are you gonna look? You're gonna look? No? Okay.
And if you're not, that's fine. I mean, that's where you're at on your journey. And my codependency work, I'm not here to drag you on that journey. Your journey is your journey. I'm not God. I don't get to decide whether you get to keep your suffering or not. That's for you to decide on your own journey. I mean, every one of us as a spiritual being has our own path. And I don't know your path anymore, actually, I would say, than you do, really, at any given moment. It's not for me to decide. And so all I can do is continue to kind of show up and give information and experience as being a clinician and working with clients. And then you get to do with it what you will.
That's right. I mean, I think that's a gift, right? That's like a gentle, like, because there are many clinicians, as we know, who will sort of force their agenda onto you. And that's not safe. That's not okay. It has to be you and your journey and your exploration and your willingness and openness.
Well, it's not authentic, change. Right? I mean, I would say the same for if I'm in a codependent relationship with somebody who has an addiction. It's got to come from them. The change can't come from me, and it can't be for me, because otherwise it's not authentic. It's got nothing to stand on, and it's going to crumble as quick as it was quote unquote built. That's not, it's got to come from within. Right. And this is so much of the conversation around codependency and why it's like, you're not God. You got to back off and let people decide what their life looks like, even if they decide that that's death. That's their choice.
Yeah. And that's so hard for people in relationship with addicts. I mean, that's a whole other episode we could probably do.
Personal experience on that one too, right? I mean, that's
same girl,
choice.
Right? Yeah. Exactly. Where can everybody find you and follow you? You have so much amazing content on Instagram and TikTok and
all the places. Yeah,
all the places.
I'm a busy gal. So Instagram is Vanessa S. Bennett. TikTok is the Codeyoda. I have a private online community where I do weekly process groups around codependency recovery. So that's available as a tool. It's funny how many therapists actually send their individual clients to me to do the group work while they're in individual therapy, which I love. That's actually great. I have a podcast, Cheaper Than Therapy. I have a book. It's Not Me, It's You.
Yes. Which we have talked about. We've talked about on the podcast. Yep. Yes.
My bio link is chock full. So I do a lot of retreats, all the things.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Everybody go check out Vanessa. If you don't already follow her, do it, because as you can tell, the information is absolutely invaluable.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Thanks for tuning in to another episode of the Divorce Survival Guide podcast. If you like what you hear, head on over to Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen in and leave me a review. And don't forget to follow me on Instagram at the Divorce Survival Guide. I'll see you next time, and until then, remember, you my love, deserve to be happy.